Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been a wild weekend. Please stay tuned here. Uh, our viewers and listeners in the U.S. and even around the world, in Canada, got some amazing stuff going on. Everything from Iran to shockwaves in the market, and some pretty amazing stuff happening in the world of baby booming and clothes. Stick to us right now, please. On the weekend, we saw increased hostilities, you can call it, related to Iran and Lebanon and Israel. So remember, with Israel pressing into Lebanon, not attacking the people of Lebanon or the country, they're trying to get rid of the Hezbollah terrorist facilities, which are dug in deeply into Lebanon. Remember that Iran, the extreme Islamist regime, for decades has been pouring hundreds of millions, they say now might even be billions of dollars, into all of these underground bombing facilities in Lebanon, from which the Hezbollah terrorists attack Israel constantly. And Israel saying they are going to finish the job of getting rid of these in Lebanon. Iran getting mad at that, firing rockets into Israel. Israel responded by actually hitting facilities in Tehran itself, the capital of Iran, and then they cooled the shooting, as Donald Trump said, cool the shooting. So we will watch and see what happens there, but definitely not overall encouraging signs. And that's had an effect clearly on the markets opening. On Monday, we saw the NASDAQ markets. Remember, these are the various groupings of companies which are measured, and then they report. We get a report overall, gives a bit of a sense of how markets might be doing. So the NASDAQ, the S&P, that's the Standard & Poor's, and then there's the Dow measurement. Remember, those are a large number of companies, and they are all looped in together, and then they do a measurement to see if overall they're moving upwards or downwards. All of these, there's some, we would say, concern in those markets in Europe. The main measurement that's used there, it's called the stocks, and that's not S-T-O-C-K, that's S-T-O-X-X. That market dropped down 0.9%. The Nikkei in Japan dropped down a point, and the South Korean market. So a couple of things affecting those. They are seen as temporary, and there's been a run of these markets moving up. But with the couple of factors there, with the hostilities over the weekend, and we've seen Brent oil and the WTI index also moving up slightly. They're still below the $100 mark. So what has this is sort of, if you are what's called a bullish, if you are a bull in the market, that means you're bullish and you think things are going up. That's why, of course, on Wall Street in New York, there's the famous bull shown as charging. But if you're a bear in the market, you think there's cause for concern. So the bulls are saying this is a bit of a pause while we see what happens. The bears are saying it's longer term. But it's interesting, one of the companies that has been looked at over the weekend, they say, some are saying that the particular sales in terms of stocks and its growth in a company called Broadcom, which is a giant tech company, they said it wasn't quite what it should or could have been. It's interesting when you look at this, when you've seen a long run of historic high prices when these companies are selling their stock, which shows improvement in the market. People are saying, well, the Broadcom thing, we don't know, it didn't sell as well as we thought it would, or its prices and its announcement over the weekend wasn't as high as we thought. I want you to consider this: the year-to-year announcement in the sale of Broadcom stocks showed an increase of 140%. 140%, any way you look at it, is staggering in terms of positive price increase, but it wasn't as high as many people thought. Many people thought it would be even higher. So that's causing a bit of concern. And really what's happening is people are saying not so much is the whole AI boom stopping. It's not so much stopping, it's the guessing game is which companies are going to benefit the most. That's really what the question is. And so people are comparing it to the early years of the internet, where there was massive selling going on, profits being taken. Everybody was investing like crazy. And then there was a pause, and people were saying, does this mean the end of the internet? And of course it wasn't. The internet has exploded into one of the most, probably the most profit increasing areas in all of stock market history, with thousands and thousands of companies benefiting and hundreds of millions of investors, including pension funds, benefiting through the internet. So people are comparing it. They say it's a similar comparison. There's been this rapid increase in AI. There's no question it's going to continue. Now it's a matter of which companies are going to be the successful ones. So people are watching on that. We'll see what happens tomorrow and through the week. As you know, for our Canadian and U.S. listeners, and even those from internationally, we're doing this running commentary on the West Coast politics in the U.S. and the East Coast politics, and the mayor race, the mayoralty race for the city of Los Angeles has been our focus in measuring this. Mayor Karen Bass has been running into trouble in the election there. So what happens, they've had the vote. As you know, we've talked about this, and in California and in Los Angeles, they have a law which allows votes to be mailed in, and as long as they are postmarked, as long as those mail-in ballots are postmarked before the end of Election Day, which was last week, then they will be counted. But they stay in warehouses for days, and now it's going into a couple of weeks. And for some reason, and it's making everybody crazy, the delay in counting those thousands and thousands of mail-in ballots is keeping the announcement being made in terms of who won. Spencer Pratt, who was challenging Karen Bass, and he was seen from the Republican side, the first time in decades that a Republican was getting a shot at it, was seen as maybe being a winner. And what happens is there were quite a number of names on the ballot. So remember, when they finally do get the final ballot number in, only the top two names will advance to a final runoff vote. And if you recall, I said over a week ago, keep an eye on the person who is seen to be running third, and her name is Nithya Raman. Now, she is also a socialist. She's left-leaning, but getting a lot of votes from Democrats and from the left, because she's seen as not as much as extreme and a disaster as the present mayor. And I said, keep an eye on her. She could be the power broker here. She could be the one that makes the difference. In fact, as the votes are coming in now, it looks like Spencer Pratt may even be falling slightly behind her. She, in fact, may be the one in second place behind Karen Bass. So watch for that over this week as these votes continue to roll in. In Maine, now we switch to the East Coast again to show, remember, this is a race for the Democrats, the primary, it's called the primary, to see who will be the Democrat candidate who will challenge the Republican for the Senate seat in Maine. That vote takes place in November. So this is called the primary, and this is for the Democrats. And remember, this is the one where we have this Graham Plattner. We've talked about him a fair bit. Really, probably in U.S. history, there hasn't been somebody with more outrageous concerns being expressed about him in terms of the sexting that he does, in terms of his long history of messages from what he does when he's sitting in a porta potty to extremely foul stuff, to a video celebrating the killing of a U.S. soldier. He's a significant Democrat, not just Democrat, but left-wing socialist. He claimed to be an oyster farmer. I guess he did sell farms to his mother's restaurant. I would say, and this is just a straight-out statement, probably you haven't seen a candidate with as much, let's say, awful stuff stuck to him as this one. But people are staying with him, and they're saying they're going to continue to support him as the Democrat candidate. on the Bill Maher show. Bill Maher, of course, being a well-known Democrat, on Friday night, he even went hard against this particular individual, Graham Plattner, saying how on earth could people be possibly voting for someone like this. I think it's ushered us into a whole new era where almost anything goes. All that matters is, do you stick with your party, and do you stick with the party's choice come, as they say, hell or high water? We've never seen, I just can't think of a case where we've seen a candidate with so much bad stuff attached to him, but because he's a Democrat, they're sticking with him. They're nervous. Some of the main leading Democrats around the U.S. they're kind of nervous when they talk about him, but they're sticking with him. So it looks like anything goes in politics these days. Something that has got a lot of attention and anger, heartbreak, and support right across the board over the weekend. Now, you may not have previously heard of a very influential YouTube couple. Jesse and Ashley Ridgway are their names. They have about 4 million followers on YouTube, and they made an announcement that they are going to be, first when Ashley got pregnant, there was great joy, and they made lots of announcements about that and their oncoming baby. And now they have just announced they're going to be aborting their baby because they've had the testing done. And for those of you who are familiar with the nomenclature here, trisomy 21 is a certain DNA marker, and it suggests the baby has a very strong chance of being born Down syndrome, as we would call it. And so they went on to publicly announce, they even showed the ultrasound of a living baby and the heartbeat, and definitely a baby there. It's almost 5 months old. And they announced they are going to abort. And that is just, the internet has caught on fire with people who are supporting and people who are opposed. Some of the strongest, let's say, reaction against that are from disabilities groups, saying people with disabilities are just as worthy of life and are just as able to bring joy and satisfaction and meaning as somebody without disabilities. We've got groups of people who, associations who have children or are now adults with Down's syndrome, and it's really caused a lot of concern. I mean, my heart goes out to this situation because, having worked in a situation, being many, many years ago, administrator of a school where we celebrated one or more of the students who was a student, Down syndrome. And I can remember the graduation ceremony there, and people seeing this 18-year-old Down syndrome boy actually reading from on the screen, and everybody clapping and lots of tears. So this is definitely a heartbreaking one, folks, and real concerns, rightly so, from persons with disabilities and from persons in the Down's syndrome community. And we have people that were coming forward and offering to adopt the child. We'll see where all that goes, but it does appear they're going ahead with this. In Cuba, it's interesting to note that this headline coming out of Cuba today, and for years, if not for decades, we've seen mainstream media never going after the devastation in Cuba, how Cuba has been a poverty-stricken nation under former Fidel Castro, and then his brother, and then the present regime. Cuba, which is communist, and a desecration of human rights. You can't speak up. You can't have political parties. I've been to Cuba. It's wonderful people trapped in a terrible system. And as they continue to have problems because they're Venezuelan oil that used to keep them going, of course, the Trump regime has smashed Venezuela's narco-terrorist regime, and the oil does not get through to Cuba. And so it gets to, you get to see a chance of what a communist country really looks like in terms of the poverty. And mainstream media, the big headline over the weekend was bemoaning the fact that about the problem with Cuba's, as they call them, their iconic antique cars, that they're having problems keeping them going. This has been really, to me, it's just astounding over the decades, where the reason there are antique cars in Cuba is they can't import new cars. They're stuck with cars that are 50 years old or more, and they have to keep refixing them. And thumbs up to the people of Cuba. They become very innovative in terms of keeping these cars going. And that's what mainstream media reports, not the fact that communists have suffocated people there for decades, but the fact that even the old cars are continuing to break down. And so they're weeping over that. Another area of weeping that happened over the weekend, if you've been following this, the famous show called 60 Minutes in the US, and many people in Canada and around the world follow that show. And it's been, CBS, as you know, has had a shift. They've finally, we've got a major news network that has been saying, you know what, maybe we should have a little more balanced or even center or centrist right, even conservative viewpoints on the show, rather than consistently for decades 60 Minutes has projected from the left-leaning, even socialist side. And in doing the takeover there, the guy who's kind of headed up the 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley, is now on the outs. He's been moved out. And, to see these guys, I don't know if you saw the interview over the weekend, he's crying, he's weeping at the loss of journalism in the United States. What he's weeping about is the fact that he can't believe there are so many people who would like to see balanced views. They don't want to see the conservative view consistently trashed. And I'm getting a little tired of seeing these people who have controlled and stranglehold on media, only allowing leftist, progressive, and woke views. And now they just can't believe that people actually would like to see balanced news. So kind of funny to see the weeping that goes on there. In Alberta and around the world, people have been watching Alberta, and there's been commentary, people comparing what's going on in Alberta to Brexit that took place as a number of years ago, when England and the UK exited their position relative to the European community. And everybody, of course, was bemoaning that fact. And people are watching in Alberta because they say Alberta is going separatist. Well, hold on a second. For instance, on the weekend, the governing party in Alberta, the United Conservative Party in Alberta, with Danielle Smith as its leader, had their largest ever leadership fundraising dinner in the history of Alberta. And what is happening in Alberta is this: because there is a rising feeling of concern about and grievances, well-founded grievances, relative to their treatment that Alberta gets from the federal government. And I agree with those grievances, but I don't agree with this notion to separate. But Alberta has a law, it's called the Citizens Initiative Act, which allows, if you get a certain percentage of citizens signing on for and asking for a referendum on a question, then the government will allow the question to come forward. So what's happened is on October 19th of this year, there will be a referendum on not just one, but 10 questions. 10 questions that have come up, and they regard immigration, they regard crime. One of the questions is, should the government begin the process of preparing a question about possible separation from Canada? So it's not a separatist vote that's taking place. The question is, should the government begin to prepare? And they would need a majority vote on that particular question. So Danielle Smith, the Premier, is very strong on encouraging people to think about a strong Alberta within a national context in Canada, staying in Canada, but having more autonomy over its own direction and future, just like the province of Quebec does. So that's really what we'll see. There'll be a lot of discussion coming up as we get to that vote on October 19th. It's projected that on a straight up and down separatist vote, if that was to happen, which it won't be happening, about a third, they're saying a third might actually vote to separate or to leave. My own view, as I've stated here before, is that they will not, if there was a vote taken to separate, it would not be successful. They would not get 50%. We'll see how things go on October the 19th. Well, the World Cup, of course, all kinds of stories, a lot of them positive. people who love the game. And there are, Sports Illustrated just did an analysis of the 16 cities in throughout North America, mainly, that will be hosting World Cup games. Vancouver was voted the #1 host city, so a lot of people celebrating that, not just in Canada, but around the world. The economics of these games is something that I have always raised and been concerned with. I love sports and love soccer, or football as they call it, not as much as hockey, but the revenues, the economic tests and projections have come in. The revenues for Vancouver and for the games themselves are expected to be $600 million, but the costs are supposed to be will probably be north of $725 million. So the games, usually these World Cup games, for the host cities and the host countries, they usually lose money. As a matter of fact, when they look over at the numbers that have come in since 1966, because remember, these are every 4 years, 11 of 14 of the games have lost money for the cities and the countries. It's been a burden on the taxpayer. And 2 of those, the results are still being disputed. So overwhelming majority, they lose money. And the Vancouver venues, the Canadian venues, are projected to lose money also. So that's part of the debate. Should taxpayers be footing the bill for the $1 million football or soccer clubs that benefit from these, from the actual World Cup organization that benefits? And of course, these are multi-million-dollar players that come. And I think that should be the consideration. We'll see if that rolls on. Our hearts are going out to the people in the Philippines over the weekend. As a matter of fact, just today, it would be Monday their time. Today, our time, a terrible earthquake there. 32 people, they say, have died, most of them in a mudslide, but some in collapsing buildings. I just want to make a comment here. I've been to the Philippines a number of times and went there as Canada's representative following disastrous earthquakes back in the 2000s, and met with the president, and we took supportive funds out to some of the communities that have been hard hit. Very important to note that countries that have, and you know me, I am always opposed to unnecessary regulations and regulatory regimes that go crazy with the bureaucrats that design them, but we do have to have good building regulations. And in North American cities and European cities, those regulations are very strong as to how buildings should be built. They are not very strong in the Philippines, and that's why you have buildings collapse. So the rate, it's a 7.8 on the Richter scale, this earthquake that just hit the Philippines. Now, I was asked by the government of Japan back in 2013 to do a review of the follow-up processes of rebuilding and the preventive processes that were in place in Japan when they had that terrible tsunami, which was a 9-point on the Richter scale. It was an earthquake, it was a tsunami, and the city of Tokyo, millions and millions of people. It was the epicenter, really, one of the epicenters of the actual earthquake. There was barely even a crack in the walls of any buildings, very minimal damage for an earthquake that was stronger than what just hit in the Philippines and hitting a more populated area, and it's all because of building standards. So, if the one thing the United Nations should be doing, rather than some of the foolish endeavors they promote, is helping internationally, helping cities to at least study and look at countries that have strong building regulations where people survive and buildings survive these earthquakes. People don't die, but our hearts go out, and we hope we see good recovery going in place into the Philippines. Well, just on the Gen Z and millennial look, as you know, and as my wife has pointed out to me, I didn't really observe it, but there was a period of time just shortly where the beige baby look, all beige clothing for babies, and a real minimalist approach over the last few years. It looks like the new moms and dads and the new babies are shedding that. The look is very much an oversized clothing look now, bright clothes. A company called Milk Teeth out of California sort of epitomizes this. Real change going on, babies brightening up and going into the maximize clothing look, along with this continues, the Gen Z and millennials to a degree still looking at the used, I used to call it the used market, but going and doing thrift shopping seems to still be going very strong. So look for the babies looking brighter and a little more bulky in their new look. The U.S. team, just talking about the World Cup, from the U.S. team, we see Christian faith, in the U.S., certainly in football, professional football, as we call it. There are many examples of expressions of Christian faith among the athletes. And the U.S. men's team, one of their key players, Christian Pulisic, I hope we pronounced his last name correctly, talking about his faith and faith in Christ and his practice of reading the Bible and prayer seeming to get some attention, not often seen in the World Cup of Soccer. We'll see where it all goes as the games continue. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Catch you tomorrow.